In the U.S., Democratic and some Republican lawmakers are calling for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to be fired after multiple scandals. Let's take a look at the controversial official and how he's managed to hold onto his post so far, despite, or perhaps because of, these scandals.
A television host with little experience in management, suddenly in charge of millions of employees and the world's biggest military budget. For Pete Hegseth, it's been a bumpy ride. His confirmation hearings in the Senate were contentious. Democrats called Hegseth out for his lack of experience and allegations of sexual assault and drinking in the workplace. Hegseth was confirmed by a razor-thin margin in the Republican-controlled Senate. Shortly after taking office, he found himself in a major scandal. Signalgate was the nickname given to a leaked text chat where Hegseth and other senior administration officials discussed a strike on Houthi rebels in Yemen. The chat was accidentally shared with a journalist, a shocking lapse in operational security. Hegseth responded to the outcry by deflecting blame and lashing out.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again. Nobody was texting war plans.
Loyalty to President Donald Trump seemed to save Hegseth's skin. He aligned himself with Trump's attacks on so-called wokeness, insulted the media, and allowed no daylight between himself and the boss. And he enthusiastically promoted Trump's decision to change the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War.
We're going to go on offense, not just on defense. Maximum lethality, not tepid legality. Violent effect, not politically correct. We're going to raise up warriors, not just defenders.
Hegseth put this into effect with a Pentagon purge, firing senior officers, including the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the first woman to command the Navy. He summoned hundreds of generals from around the world to listen to a speech on the department's new outlook.
For too long, we've promoted too many uniformed leaders for the wrong reasons. Based on their race, based on gender quotas, based on historic so-called firsts. We became the woke department, but not anymore.
The next scandal wasn't long in coming. Alleged drug-running boats targeted by the U.S. military in the Caribbean Sea. Legal experts condemned the use of military force against criminals rather than an enemy threat. Some said the attacks could be war crimes. Democrats and a few Republicans demanded investigations, with senior Republicans refusing to vouch for Hegseth. Hegseth was again defiant.
The American people are safer because narco-terrorists know you can't bring drugs through the water and eventually on land if necessary to the American people. We will eliminate that threat, and we're proud to do it.
These scandals would have been more than enough to sink a normal cabinet member when Trump's approval ratings are low. But normal is not a word many people would use to describe the administration Hegseth works for.
For more on Pete Hegseth's tenure as U.S. Defense Secretary, I'm joined now by Mark Cancian. He's a retired colonel and senior advisor with the Center for Strategic and International Studies and joins us from Arlington, Virginia. It's good to have you with us. It's only been 10 months and already Pete Hegseth's faced numerous scandals as Secretary of Defense. What do you make of his time in office so far?
You have to separate out the different strands of his experience. Things like eliminating climate change and DEI programs, the so-called woke programs, and policies like attacking drug boats. Those come from the White House, and he is in sync with them. May not like those policies, but he's carrying out what the president has directed and what the president ran on. Inside the department, he's talked a lot about warrior ethos, about focusing on war fighting, about excellence, about meritocracy. And with many of the troops, that resonates. On the other hand, you've had these scandals that we've just heard about, and those have been problematic. And they could have been cut off with a little more experience and a little more judgment. For example, on Signalgate, if he had just got up and said, I made a mistake, it'll never happen again, probably would have been the end of it. But instead, of course, he took this Fox News, highly combative stance. And as a result, the issue hung around.
And one of those issues has been this strike on a suspected drug trafficking vessel in the Caribbean. And there were lots of shifting narratives over the follow-up strike as well. Congress has seen a video of that attack. What do you think happens next?
Well, the second strike is much more controversial than the original strikes. And even though the legality may be the same, or the lack of legality, attacking what appeared to be helpless mariners struck a chord. Admiral Bradley's testimony, Admiral Bradley being the commander of Special Operations Forces there, his testimony helped Hegseth a lot because Bradley said that there had been no kill directive and that Bradley, had made the decision for that second strike and thought that it was appropriate, explaining why. But there are still some loose ends, and this question will be with us for a little while. The first loose end is whether there was a kill order. Washington Post had reported that there was. The second is whether these survivors really were helpless. People who have seen the video come away with different perspectives. And finally, the policy did change. The next time there were survivors, the United States allowed the Mexican Coast Guard to pick them up. So what caused the change in policy? And because of these uncertainties, the issue will be with us.
Yeah, I'm just going to pick up on that point because just the general policy of firing at these boats, which has been going on for 3 months now, we've seen more than 80 people killed. Surely, I mean, with the questions around even the legality of this, that's still an issue. What's your opinion on the way this is being handled?
Well, the president's justification for the attacks is that this comes under his inherent powers of the presidency to defend the nation against foreign attack. And he argues that the cartels are attacking the United States. That's quite a stretch, and many legal scholars believe that it's not sustainable. It has not come before the courts, and part of the problem is that the drug smugglers don't have much of a constituency in the United States, so it's going to be hard to get a case in front of the Supreme Court to call it illegal. The second strike, that's in a different situation.
And just very quickly, we've seen the Democrats calling on or encouraging U.S. troops to refuse illegal orders. What did you make of that video?
Well, two things. The first is that the members were within their rights to make that video. They did not ask service members to desert or to mutiny or to do anything illegal. So the notion that they were traitors and that this was actionable is ridiculous. On the other hand, I think that the message did a disservice to military members for three reasons. The first is that they implied that the president had given illegal orders, but they didn't give any examples. And even in follow-up interviews, they gave no examples. Second, they didn't help service members disagree with what they thought were illegal orders. If you're in the service, they teach you, ask for it in writing and get the opinion of a lawyer. And finally, they said that they had the service members' backs if anything should happen. But they're 6 members out of 535. They can't protect anybody.
Right.
So.
Okay. Mark Cancian, thank you very much for your insights on this story.